just gonna run to the wings room. So fast.
That was San Francisco.
Go back at 1 a.m. Finish up homework until 3:30 and then straight to class. I've had a week's worth of caffeine today, so I'm good for now.
Good, hang in there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, I was going to say nap when I get home, but I think I'll be through my bedtime. So.
Good, that's even better.
Yeah.
Get you back on track.
Yeah.
Do you get out to San Francisco much?
Yeah, so it used to be San Francisco and Phoenix, and like dual trips all started at 12:30. It used to go monthly, for a week a month. Now it's every 2-ish, once a quarter. So it's always nice. It's always big thing for this. It's nice to get back and have more extended friends.
Yeah, we like San Francisco.
It's changed a bit. Have you been since COVID?
Yeah.
It's I still love it.
Yeah.
But it's changed a bit.
What's different as far as you're concerned?
The city never bounced back from COVID, to where it was at least. There's always been a lot of crime, a lot of these things that keep the city. But previously it was outweighed by the energy, the tech that it was just that everything was booming. Now you have a 40% corporate vacancy in terms of square footage for real estate. So all the companies moved out, everyone went remote, so all of the things that were there before still left. The crime, homelessness, now there's it's empty.
Yeah.
It's a lot more prevalent.
We get out there almost once a year. Now that you mention it, I think that sense of kind of a little bit of a change. When we go, we can stay in the Cal Hollow.
It's football season, and Uber Eats is dropping undefeated deals on all your game day favorites. This week, get a free bacon king meal from Burger King with your Uber Eats order of $20 or more. Still craving? We got you covered with game day deals on pizza, wings, tacos, you name it. All season long and only on Uber Eats. Official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now for game day. Terms apply. See app for details.
It's where all the companies were.
For more than 200 years, Brooks Brothers has been the premier source for the best shirts. Anyone who has worn Brooks Brothers, and that includes U.S. presidents, Hollywood legends, and our world icons, knows that a Brooks Brothers shirt means quality. Did you know Brooks Brothers invented the button-down collar in 1900, and the button-down undershirt, a fashion innovation that's inspired countless imitators. There's simply no shirt like a Brooks Brothers shirt. New Brooks Brothers customers enjoy 20% off of your first shirt purchase with code SHIRTS.
With T-Mobile, you can get
I left a couple of additional flyers out for you all to consider, and I'll encourage. Becky, you may have signed up for one of these already, if I'm not mistaken.
So I did the college roll.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
I was so glad to see you had signed up for it.
And I would recommend it to anybody who had hesitation about doing it.
Great, it's nice to be, the deep dive I think is going to be similar, though it's more focused on particular issues. And this is an initiative that's, that we connected through our inclusive leadership program. And I'd be interested to hear more about your experience with it, because for me, so much of what I think enables inclusion is about that capacity for dialogue. And these programs are meant to provide everyone with space to do that. But anyway, would you mind for a second just talking about your experience? I don't know if the three of you had considered it, but would you mind just sharing?
Have you ever played any Jackbox games?
Yeah.
It's the same, it's the founder of Jackbox. So it's set up like Fibbage or whatever. And you're welcomed into a room with somebody who either identifies politically differently than you've identified yourself, or if they can't find a match there, with somebody who's regionally or somehow is not in your orbit. So they matched me with a young person from, sorry, I sound like an old person. They matched me with a young person from Texas, and so the right side of your screen has a question prompt, and you answer the question prompt. When you both answer, then it prompts you to
My mom's ringtone. Sorry.
Are we okay?
It's my mom when she calls. It goes off in meetings, yeah, it's.
So then once you've answered the question, like, and it's hot button issues, like, what do you feel like contraception should be provided to everybody, right? So I strongly agree, I agree, I strongly disagree, I disagree, I don't have an opinion on it. And so once you've both answered, it brings you to the next screen, and the two of you are supposed to talk about your answers and like why you agree or what you picked and why. And so it moves you through 18 or so hot button issues, and what she and I did, it doesn't ask you what your political leaning is, it's just the way the question is phrased, it kind of gives you some room to discuss like the points that you overlap on and where you start to maybe diverge. So she and I overlapped on many things. There were some things that she took a position very much in one way, or some things that I took a position very much in the other way, but by and large, there was a lot of overlap. So then at the end, the last question is, how do you identify politically? So I identify as liberal, and she identifies as conservative. She was like, I thought you were conservative. I was like, I thought you were liberal.
Interesting.
And then the follow-up to that, in addition to just meeting an interesting person who walks a different life than I have, and talking about issues in a way that I don't usually talk about them with another person, especially one that I don't know, I then got into the car to a Lyft the following day, and I get in the car, and the guy is listening to Fox News on the radio, and it's like pieces of Trump's some recent thing that he said, and I get in the car, and my instinct was to like tense up and react and dislike the guy, but because I had just spoken with this conservative woman from Texas, I was like, you know what, he's got a story, and like it softens me
So
in a
good.
future interaction.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, because to be honest, I've understood the structure and I was excited about it, but I really haven't engaged with it, you know. So I really appreciate hearing more about the specifics of your experience. And this next round is coming up, and I would encourage all of you to consider. It takes roughly about an hour, Becky?
It was timed to be an hour, and so we were free to leave at the hour mark or finish up the questions. And we were so close to finishing that we just very quickly moved through them, and we were done maybe an hour and 10.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Consider it, guys. Again, it's completely optional, and as I said, it's part of our inclusive leadership program, which is another initiative that's available to you all while you're here, to the extent that you want to engage with some of that programming. Anyway, thank you for sharing that. Want to discuss it a little bit. I'll tell you what I have in mind for today, for this afternoon. And it centers around here, but I'm also really realizing I may have given you all some conflicting information for today. But ideally, or I guess I should say, at least, maybe, let's try to do, let's work with this model. I'm going to actually put you guys to work with it, consider what you find interesting, not just about your style, but really this as a tool for relating to other people. Wanted to share maybe some guidance and get some initial reactions to the multi-source feedback process, and share some thoughts on what tends to work in general with tools like that, and ways to think about how it relates to other information I'm asking you to work with this semester. And then let's get back to values. Another piece of sort of the self-awareness material from the previous discussion that we didn't really get to spend too much time with, just to kind of tie some of that up. my hope in general at the end of today is you've really got a lot of information, assessment-based information. And certainly enough, I think as, in terms of that deliverable I'm asking you to work on, which is that paper, you've got a lot of those pieces. And then, as we go forward in the course, I think we're gonna take a little bit more of a normative perspective to say, which is to say, let's look at some specific skill areas. Again, still with that idea of reflection and introspection, but with an intention of at least trying to look at, what does social science tell us about how those skills play out and what we can do to be more effective. But today, let's try to wrap up the assessment-driven piece of it. Here's the confusing part, and this is on me. I'm not sure where things stand. I had on the syllabus still the SSS software in-basket exercise. Did you guys do any of it? That's fine, because I was on the fence about it, and I needed it to be clear. What I'd like to do with it is I think a good way to use it, it's in your Whitman Cameron text. I think a good way to use it will be towards the end of the semester as sort of not a test, but maybe a way to reflect back on the application of some things. So, okay, good. Without me clarifying it, nonetheless, did what I would have hoped, which was to not do it. So that's good. But that's my plan for today, at least what I have in mind. What's on your minds?
I completed my disc assessment, scratching off and tallying, and then I tried to plot. And so what's on my mind is how much more beyond the plotting I'm supposed to have done, because I didn't
Okay.
finish it.
We'll finish it, together here. Yeah, there's different levels of interpretation in there, and that's fine. Where do others of you stand with it? Similarly, or did you get through it? Scratching off. Okay.
The first three, I accidentally penciled in and
Yeah.
realized we were supposed to
Yeah.
scratch and I'd go back and try to find what symbols
Were
were
you able to
boxes.
find it?
I think so.
Okay.
I think we did a decent.
Okay.
It's only the first three questions,
Okay.
but.
I'm a bit more behind, I'm at the tallying phase.
Okay, all right. Well, let's, Amanda, maybe, as we start to talk to, I'll say, keep going with it, and let's get some of that done, so we can work with it today, and utilize it. And that actually is where I wanted to start, with the DISC model, and, some of its application. We're a small group, so some of what, that'll give us a chance to maybe think more carefully about it, but also maybe some of the nuance, we'll have to tangle out, further. And, I don't know, I guess I'm gonna start here. Most of you have probably encountered at least this image from time to time, maybe not, but I'll start there and looking at it. Anybody seeing, as you look at it, just an old woman?
Oh, no,
Okay. Anybody seeing just a young woman? You're just seeing the young woman?
I've seen this before too, so I know there's an old woman in there somewhere, but I'm not seeing it right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I see a young woman.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I see a young woman right now.
Okay. Becky, can you point out the old woman to them?
Should I get up?
Sure.
So the young woman's chin is turned to the side and looking to the back of the room.
Oh, I
And
see.
it's her nose, it's the old woman's nose. And this is the old woman's
Yeah,
mouth.
there it is.
These are her eyes.
Great, thanks. Well, and how about, by the way, the other image? Everybody sees a frog? Anybody see a horse?
No.
Well, if you tilt your head, you might see that horse.
Oh, yes, I do.
Or maybe if
Oh,
I
no.
turn
Ah,
it, the
there
horse
you
starts
go.
to show up.
What? I still don't see the horse.
Yeah, me.
There.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
oh my god.
How would you have to
Now I get the frog. Wow, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
They're neat, right? They're examples of how sensory perception works and the ways in which, frankly, from that physiological standpoint, our attention is drawn to things that are most accessible for us. And arguably, had we been somehow engaged in conversations or looking at pictures of young women, chances are that's what all of us would have seen first. And we're conversely, we've been engage with conversations about older people or older people, images maybe that would have shaped what we've seen. Well, the reason I'm sharing it with you to start is, I guess, consider that that's part of what the DISC model is about. It's a tool on the one hand to appreciate why it is that we might be tuning into particular interactions with a certain point of view. But also, I think even more important perhaps, at least in terms of how I come to work with it, it's a tool for better recognizing and appreciating why it is that somebody might be engaging with the same experience and yet interpreting it differently. And I think certainly in the business world and arguably I think especially from a leadership point of view, there are times when we want one point of view to prevail. However, maybe one way to appreciate the DISC model is that it helps us to recognize that if in fact I do want you to see and or even need you to see my old woman, I'm going to be more successful at it if I can appreciate how and why it is that you're seeing a young woman, metaphorically. So does that make sense? Again, a tool to understand ourselves and on the other hand, a tool for better tuning into why and how other people are seeing things differently. Now, having said all of that, I wouldn't necessarily interpret what we're about to work with and what you guys completed as a personality measure. So back to the idea of behavior as a function of P and E, you guys remember that formula, right? Person and environment. Some of perhaps what shows up in our DISC style, is related to underlying traits, no doubt about it, but a lot of it also has to do with context. Things like the role that you're in, things like what others are like that you're interacting with, for example. And it's not unusual that, maybe were you to have completed this assessment with your home life in mind, it might have been somewhat different than what it looks like in your professional life, for example. Or maybe, if you guys do this 6 months from now or a year from now, you might see some changes based upon how your role or your own insights have changed. But having said that, it is a tool for getting insight to what I'm like, and also, especially from that point of view, right? And I don't think this is an issue for any of you in here, but in that sense, it's not an excuse. This is the way I am, so therefore deal with it necessarily, right? But it is a tool for maybe helping each of us identify a little bit more clearly some of our strengths and the ways we want to change or at least be mindful of some of those limitations. So to me, those are all things to keep in mind with tools like this, right? They're just springboards. But the DISC model in particular, especially because I think there's a tendency for them in talking, publishing this, sort of, they wind up talking about it as personality. And as I said, to some extent that's true, but it's about your style. And that's shaped by what you're like, but also by context, right? So all of those things. So, having pointed that out, I guess for me, as you work with it, maybe two things can be helpful. One is focus on yourself, right? Understand what that style is like. What do you appreciate about it? What do you recognize as limitations? And for me, by the way, right in the context of this course, I think it's a great tool for looking for convergence. What are you seeing here that's consistent with what showed up in your multi-source feedback? And or consistent or inconsistent with some of the other assessments that you've completed. So I'm looking for you guys to do all of that analytical work, right, in that context as a way to reinforce an understanding of it. On the other hand, I think another useful part of our discussion today relates to maybe as we work with it, think about important people that you have to interact with, and maybe especially people that sometimes are challenging. And try to, as you work with this, start to maybe consider, what am I learning about this tool that's going to help me better communicate or interact with those individuals as well. So those are the two perspectives we'll try to play around with today, to work our way through it, and to go from there. Let's see where, right, so maybe as you guys are working with this, let's level set a little bit, make sure maybe you're getting a little bit closer to completing it. There are three kind of different levels of interpretation in what you're working with. And one is like sort of to look at it from the perspective of your predominant style. And that is to say the style that's your highest plotted point on your graph, if you will, right? So in other words, one style, and by the way, for some of you, it's not unusual, maybe there's 2 points that are equally the same, in all of that. May I borrow your book for just a second? Just for the, you can just help me. You've already done, it looks like, which is great, a lot of that work. And so if you're looking in this book for the graph that we will work with the most, it's really this graph 3. What you might want to do, by the way, with graphs 1 and 2 is, for graph 1, maybe write the word something like others above it. That is to say, it's kind of meant to give you an impression, sorry for holding on to this particular, an impression for how you think others experience you. And then for graph 2, maybe write the word stress over it, which it's intended to maybe give you an indication of what you're like when you're especially pressured. Now, as you look at those 3, by the way, maybe they're going to be more or less consistent, but maybe the intensity level will vary. Or maybe one style is going to sort of show up a little bit higher. Graph 3, right, if you're going to put a word above it, is self. It's sort of how do you see yourself, if you will. So that's that measure of sort of your predominant style in terms of how it plays out. And then if you flip the page, you've got, let me just jump ahead here for a second. It's really going to page number 8. Really pages 5 through 9, but page 8 in particular. What you're going to see there is an indication of maybe what you're like in relation to all 4 style types. So again, there's more scratch off there to do, and then you've kind of done it. If maybe you noticed, by the way, the words here are basically the same words on when you did the assessment. And the point isn't to say, like, as you look at that every single one of those notions resonates for you. Maybe some do and maybe some don't. But to maybe look at it and identify which of those do you think best characterize you. So in other words, what you're like in relation to each of those 4 different style types. And then the 4th part of it, which I guess starts, there's a lot of pages to it, but if you work your way towards the back, gives you gives you a sense for your pattern, if you will. And that is to say maybe some ideas about what you're like in relation to the way your combination of all 4 styles comes together. So let's maybe work through this a little bit. But and Becky, let me get a sense for where you are you're good, Linda.
I
You
finished it.
you finished it, right? Where are you with sort of completing it? Where
Sorry, that's the flying point
Okay.
phase.
Okay, so you're still kind of at a point where you want to identify what your predominant style is. And to do that, right, you got the numbers here, and that's what you're going to kind of try to use to plot it. So these are the kind of the instructions to sort of follow through.
And only as to graph 3, right? We're focusing on graph 3.
Yeah, you'll wanna plot all of them, but the one that really matters for how you're saying yourself is graph 3. So so it looks like you got the points, okay, good. And, so you got D, okay, good, so you got your plots kind of pointed if I'm seeing this right. Okay.
So then I would scratch off 17, or under I, I would scratch off.
What you wanna do, sorry guys, is you're gonna wanna look, to get your segment numbers, you're gonna wanna look across. So, I'm gonna go to here, so for your D style, for this one, this first one, your segment is 5. You put that number there,
Okay.
and then for this one, your segment becomes 4. And for this one, your segment becomes 3.
And then it goes back.
Back to 4, so those are the numbers you're gonna put there.
Thank you.
And Amanda, you're still kind of working with it a little bit, right?
I'm on this portion where I'm just
Okay,
scratching off
okay.
this, yeah.
Where are the rest of you at? You guys still doing any plotting or looking for things, or?
I'm just reading, it's a self-structure.
Okay, good, okay. And you're all set, right, Kyle?
Yeah, this is interesting too. I was the same for all 3, including the stress as well.
Yeah.
Like the-
Yeah, and then, that's, not unusual, you know. And, probably some valuable things for you to appreciate about that kind of consistency.
This was, I think either I missed it or what you described makes sense. I only saw like how to interpret graph 3. I didn't see much, there wasn't much talk about how to interpret graph 1 and 2.
There's really, it's really sort of, and what I'm offering there about graphs 1 and 2 is sort of more ballpark than, but yeah, the main thing you're working with is graph 3 there. And then you took a look at that pattern that emerged, right? And what you want to do there, I'm going to pause just a minute, and Becky and Amanda, I'm not sure you'll completely catch up, I'm going to
Okay.
keep going, but let's
Yeah.
make sure. So Becky, the things you'll want to do, right, if you go on to that next part, is really here also. So this time it's looking, I think, at the intensity numbers,
Okay.
which are these
The
numbers.
17,
Yeah,
the-
yeah, and how they relate to those points. And the idea is to scratch off maybe 3 to 5, that point, plus 3 to 5 above it, and 3 to 5 below it. And when you do that, you'll uncover a bunch of words. And some of them you're gonna look at and you're gonna say, what? Oh yeah, that describes me. And some of them you're gonna say, what? That doesn't describe me.
So once you learn how to use the scratch off, it's pretty cool.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Yeah, like, at first it wasn't working, then I just got a bigger coin, I was like, I'm afraid I'm gonna scratch
credit
through
card
it.
person,
Yeah.
scratch right there, like,
Yeah.
This
The
is
coin
real
works
old
well.
school, and there are online versions of this assessment, and some of them are a little bit more complex. We're doing it this way for several reasons. One, we've got a bunch of them. And two, the cost for the other assessments are considerably higher these days. And three, frankly, this works pretty well. There's actually things about it that I like, but in today's world, paper and pencil assessments are increasingly less common, so.
No, this was pretty spot on.
You figure it's resonating for you?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So where are you at in filling it out?
So I just did, I just put what my
Okay, good, so you,
classic pattern is.
okay, so you got your classic pattern, and, you'll wanna look at that. The other thing you'll wanna look at is, if you go back one page to here, so you got that already.
Yep, so
Okay,
I got
okay.
each for each, so I got risk taker, sociable, critical, and
Yep,
firm.
right, and then looking at those words and maybe, you know, check the ones that,
And it's interesting, I like that you had to scratch off 3 above and below, because I feel like when I'm not my best self, or not sure I'm not
Okay.
my best self, I can feel myself creeping up into the other
the
words.
other words,
Yeah.
okay,
I know
okay.
this is interesting.
Yeah,
And that makes a lot of sense. Good for you for thinking about it that way. And then the same thing with that pattern that I distracted you from just a minute. Look at, not everything about that pattern is necessarily gonna resonate for you. But what I would say is, you know, look at it, maybe put a plus or a check mark next to the things that you think, yeah, that describes me. Maybe put an X next to the things, no, that doesn't work for me. And chances are there's some things there that are just a basis for, well, I don't understand it, so maybe indicate that with something like a question mark, for example.
Yeah, the parts that I put an X in, I was like, hold on, let me be more introspective here, and I thought about, depending on the situation, I think I can be that type of
Good
person.
for you, that's, you know, I think that's a, you know, a positive way to go into something like this is to be, you know, what's the possibility there, you know? And as I said, you know, for me too, I know I'm throwing a lot of assessments at you. The upside of that is look for verification, you know, what's coming up that's consistent, you know, and especially in those things that maybe you don't necessarily want to see, you know?
Interesting.
Consider how it shows up.
I got creative for my stress. Maybe creative ways of getting through it. Funny enough, would you happen to have an extra one of these? My daughter's father was seeing me do it, and the entire time he's just hovering over me, like, oh my God, this is interesting, this is spot on for you. I'm just like,
Okay.
which parts? And he was like, do you have another one? I wanna do it for myself. And I was
Yeah.
like, I'll see, I'll ask the
Well,
professor.
you may be able to do it, Linda, and there are also some ways to do it with even a simple, I'll show you a way to do it on, there's an online version, a 1, 2, 3 test that's, it's a lot more concise, it's not quite as elaborate, but it gives you the overall style things as well. So there's definitely a way to get your partner to be able to.
Because we had a dialogue about this, and like outside, like it's interesting to see outside of like the workplace.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can tell you when this happens, and I can tell you when this happens. And I was just like,
Well, in fairness, that's an entirely different course, and I'm not the one to teach it, but, no, but in all seriousness, it's a great thing for people to do, you know, couples to do, and a useful way to, you know, remember we talked about sort of, you know, we talked about the Johari window last time, and, you know, maybe this is a tool that sometimes things can show up that, you know, other people will say, yeah, that's how I see you, and you haven't been thinking of yourself that way, or there's that consistency. But yeah, let's make sure we'll figure out one way or the other to see